All right, welcome to another episode of Decomposing Messiaen, where we are walking through the textbook Techniques of My Musical Language, written by the French composer Olivier Messiaen. Today, for those of you who have been following, I think today is close to the first year anniversary of these videos. I recall that when I started doing them, I had dyed my beard orange because I was working from home and wasn't out in public much. It never quite took on the brilliant orange that I was looking for, but I think maybe it was perhaps similar to this color, and it lasted a lot longer than I expected. I ended up using henna, and it probably stayed orange through to September, October. Anyway, today we are looking at chapter 12 from the Techniques of My Musical Language. This is the chapter on fugue, sonata, and plain chant forms, and there's a lot of material in this chapter. So I'm actually only going to focus on the sonata format. We already know what a sonata is, and Messiaen begins by being very clear. He supposes that we already know what sonata and fugue are. He's not going to spend a lot of time doing detailed definition of how fugues are put together with episodes and contrary information, or indeed how sonatas are put together with themes. I will say, though, right from the onset, that at the end of it, he's using sonata in a very, very general way. It's much more like an enhancement of the material from chapter 11, where he was talking about these very generic binary and ternary phrases. For him, a sonata form is really the alternation between two different thematic groups of material, and then different techniques of development and variation applied to those, without the sense of a recapitulation. Do you know what I mean? Like in a classical Mozart sonata, Beethoven sonata, you have a theme, you have development, recapitulation. And the sense of a return to a theme at the end of the sonata is kind of one of the important components of that narrative arc. Do you know what? Like in the sonata form. As we look at how Messiaen is using the term here, I really get the sense that he means more the sense of development and the alternation of development material, and definitely a return to familiar material, but not with that sort of climactic narrative sense that comes with a classical sonata. So we already know what the sonata is as far as Messiaen begins. You know, one thing you may not know is what's with this, and it's a bit different from how I'm usually set up, right? You're probably wondering what the heck's going on. What the hell is going on? Well, when we look at the analysis of a sonata form, Messiaen gives as an example the seventh movement from his Quartet for the End of Time. And his analysis of that piece requires a bit of analysis, I find, in order to line up the examples that he provides with measure numbers in the movement. And so I'm going to write that down on this piece of paper, and I thought I would record this while I'm doing it and then try some fancy editing. We'll see if that works, right? My goal is that at the end of it, you'll see maybe here. We'll see. The inset of what I'm writing, and then that will nicely tie in with what I'm saying. So if this is working, you're seeing the Messiaen page, not my notes yet, but the Messiaen page. We're going to go through all of this in detail, but I want to start by saying that I think there's a really meaningful distinction that Messiaen is drawing with the word development and the word variations. He uses the word variations when he talks about the first theme, and he uses the word development when he talks about the second theme. And as far as I can tell, there's nowhere in this chapter, or in fact anywhere else in the book, where he clearly defines the difference between what he means by development and what he means by variation. But what I'm gathering is that in a variation, the theme is unchanged. The context of the theme changes. The accompaniment may change. Certainly the texture will change, but the theme in its rhythmic and melodic contours will be unchanged. It may be transposed, but it won't be broken into constituent parts and then manipulated, which is really what development refers to when he talks about the second theme and the development of the second theme. He has 4 parts, constituent parts of the theme, and then those parts form the arrangements and the articulation of the development of that material. So I think it's really useful to realize that Messiaen is using the word sonata here very generally. He's talking about the alternation between a first and a second theme, and then he's using variation and development as different processes. Right? We'll see that this first theme will occur, and each time the theme will be in its entirety, usually presented 3 times. But what will change is the arrangement. The harmony stays the same, but the arrangement of that harmony is different. The instrumentation is different. The gestures are different. So let's dig in to the analysis at hand, right? If you look at the page that's been up here now for a while, one of the reasons that I'm going to need to do the exercise that I do, which is to line up these examples with the measure numbers in the score, is that Messiaen organizes this first by the number of the example. Right? That is an order and a sequence that's maintained throughout the entire book. These are examples 161 through 169 that are used for this particular set of analysis. And there's 300 some examples in the entire book. Within that, he has a section 4, which is referring to the variations of the 7th movement. But you can see that he refers to outline points A through G. And it just gets a little confusing when he's talking about section D, which groups examples 163, 64, and 65. But section C refers to a piece of moment in the score, but doesn't have any examples associated with it. So maybe it's just me, but I found that very an additional complication as I was trying to read through this. The other point that's worth noting is that he doesn't actually give the measure numbers of where the examples come from in the score. And in fact, in the score itself, I'm looking around to see where it is. Hang on. In the score itself, there are also no measure numbers. So the score is broken out, as you would expect, by rehearsal letters. And I was just getting myself twisted up in knots when I would say example 163 from section B of the book, but that's not section B of the score. So before we go any further, I'm going to create a matrix to help understand how this should all fit together, and it's going to be a bit of back and forth between the different pieces of paper, and hopefully that is a compelling video experience. So we have the examples from the book. We have the score itself. All right, so we have the examples from the book. from the techniques. We have the score itself, which is over here. And then I have this piece of paper here. So what I'm going to do is carefully move. So I'll see if I can bring the scores in and out of focus as I need to. I realized I never turned this light on. Let's see if that makes a difference, at least for this section. Ooh, that looks... Oh yeah, that looks much better. So the first thing I'm going to do is write down the measure numbers for the main sections in the score. So we have A through L. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and L. All right, now in the score, so in the score, I added in measure numbers. And if I just go through and write down those, you can see section D is at measure 27, and so forth. Section F is at 47. If I take my paper, and then the first thing that I'm going to do, of course, A starts at measure 1. So this is the beginning measure for each of the rehearsal numbers. Measure 13, measure 21, measure 27. See, they're not equal sizes. I'm not doing any kind of analysis of duration or of measure numbers, proportion. That might be an interesting follow-up. Now I think about it, maybe I will do that for the next. All right, I'm back up and running. Okay, a little bit of an emergency there. Apparently, I have terrible memory storage habits on my laptop. So, where was I? Yes, the starting measure of each section, measure 55. H is measure 60. I is measure 68. If we just want to make sure that I'm still on track here. Here's F. Here's I, measure 68. Perfect. It's good to double check. J is measure 72. K is measure 81. And then L is measure 92, which lasts for 2 measures, and the end is actually measure 94. Okay, so this is just to help make it a little bit easier to orient when we're looking at the examples and going through the sections. If I read through what we have here, just to quickly run through this, exposition of the first theme, example 161, and then section italic B, exposition of the second theme, then development of the rhythmic elements of the second theme, variation of the first theme, combination of the commentary on the second theme, and then finally returning to the first theme. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to write in that alternation between first and second theme, so that we have that structure in place as well. We'll have rehearsal numbers, measure numbers, and then the thematic material that Messiaen puts there. While I'm doing that, so this is the first theme, and then the second theme, sections B and C. The first theme comes back in D. It's actually quite interesting to me that Messiaen, his analysis is really pretty rudimentary, right? Like, we'll go through this, and it's interesting and fun. But I tell you, if I were to just present this as analysis for a course, perhaps like a university course or something, I wouldn't expect to do particularly well on it. It's not a particularly subtle reading. Do you know what I mean? It's just like laying out what's there and where. So it's interesting because it's Messiaen doing it. But if anyone else had done it, I would look at them and think, now what? Okay, so it's interesting if I then first theme, second theme, first theme, second theme. Again, this isn't any kind of formal durational analysis or structural analysis or anything. But it's interesting that each second theme takes up 2 rehearsal letters. 20 measures and 12 measures here. So the measures aren't consistent. But there might be something in terms of how Messiaen is thinking about the smaller units within the themes. Okay, so if I come back, and again, I'm going to look again now at the actual letters here. I want to line those up to the themes and measure numbers that we've got, so I can start to see this example is described thus and can be found in the score here as part of this particular theme. Right? So these are the outline italic letters A, and it includes example 161. The second theme is the letter B, and it includes example 162. Then there is no letter in the example for C. And then D is C. So now we're off, right? And C is the first theme, and there are no examples. He simply says, here's the first theme. Then E, which is the second theme, lines up with italic lowercase d, and it includes examples 163, 164, and 165. And I made a note here that these are measure 40, also measure 40, and then 165 is on measure 45. Let's just double check that and see what we're looking at. Example 163, 64, 65. Here's 165. And I have said that that is measure 43, which here, 43, and then the material that he's selected. I keep hitting it. Okay. So, all right, letter E lines up with G, which is a return to the first theme. We're going to come back through in the final column here and do some note-taking around what the characteristics of each section are. But for now, we're just doing this. H lines up with F, and it actually has 4 examples. Examples 166, 67, 68, and 69, which I have said are measures 60. All 3 of these are a measure 60. And then 169 is measure 74. Then that gets us back to letter G, which is the return of the first theme for the final time. And then there is no letter for the second theme return, which I have described simply as a thumping return. That's it, right? We've got rehearsal numbers to measure numbers to kind of thematic identification to then specific examples where there are some. It's interesting to know that after the first statement of the theme, he doesn't actually give any specific examples of the theme. And I think that supports the idea that in his mind, the theme is being varied but not developed. Did I get that right? I forget which one was which. Variation of the theme, most of the characteristics of the theme stay the same. The melody, the contour, the rhythm, the harmony, all stay the same. As he says, même mode et même flottement tonal. Same mode and same tonal support. Bloody chaos here. All right. So now we've got the score, and I have my notes. So let's just go through these. Right. So example 161, which is obviously the theme. It's the cello. The theme takes place 3 times. Right? First it starts here, second line, and then the third line. But that's the first theme. Then example 162 is our second theme. It's very rhythmic material where there are then and take that out. But so if there's the 2 stringed instruments, that contour of the melodic line that the violin is playing is mirrored in the piano part, or is a mirror of the piano part. In the piano and in the violin. So that's our second theme, and then at measure 27 we have our return of the first theme. So it's transposed, but you can see it's the same theme, same rhythm, and the same harmonic content. He mentions that there's counterpoint in the clarinet that comes in there, and that's the real characteristic of this second variation, is that you've got the clarinet and the violin in that counterpoint. Examples 163 through 65 is our development of the second theme, starting in measure 40, which is here. Again, the piano has a so far the same, but then it's developed as he points out in the second part of measure 40. And then the piano has these chords which I haven't practiced. So I haven't practiced these chords. So I'm just going to play them slowly in the piano. And then they're repeated. That gesture is characteristic from the second movement of the quartet. So by the time we're hearing this, some of this is very familiar. In fact, this theme here begins the second movement. Here we are. So a lot of this material in the seventh movement is restatement of material earlier in the quartet. Measure 55. So I said 55 for the return. It's actually 56, right? And then the cello. Such lovely Messiaen music, isn't it? So that then it points out at H that we have the development of the commentary on the second theme. And what he's referring to as the commentary on the second theme is this idea. The first time we hear that in this movement is on measure 17, down here. And then when we hear it, H, the other instruments are playing a version of the rhythm, a rhythmically altered version of the first melody. It's this diminution, rhythmic diminution of that material, but the center point here is the the second part of the commentary on the second movement, the commentary on the second theme, and then it ends. It leads into this wonderful Messiaen climax, and then we're starting to get very trill-like material. The example 169, which is the actual last example that he mentions, is at measure 74 in the cello line here. Page turn in. And what Messiaen describes that as a further contraction of the thematic material. So this whole last 20 or so measures leading up to K, which is the final restatement of the first theme, is sort of this overlap of a lot of the developed material throughout the piece, whereas things before had been very very siloed. There is these couple of pages here where material from theme 1 and theme 2 get mixed up, but they're getting compressed to the point where it really is kind of sequences of 4/16 notes that in context are clearly the diminution of a theme, but on their own, right? Yeah, so that's the final theme is marked ecstatique, which is a fantastic description of the shape of the movement, right? From this very opening to this sort of glorious it's all pretty cool. And then at 92 we have the short, very short statement of the second theme. And then these notes that no pianist wants to get wrong, and I'm going to everyone will know if you get those wrong. There's no way to just go like that. You got to get them right. And so that's it. That's the structure of the piece. In Messiaen's way of thinking about it, right? Like the sonata form becomes this alternation of material, and it's not a complex formal structure, is it? I mean, it's not demanding that we look at kernels of meaning and trace them through complicated development. It's not Brahms, right? And it's not Schoenberg. It's really quite mechanical in its formal structure, which is as Messiaen intends. I mean, some of the other sections that we've talked about, his interest in Renaissance troubadour music, like verse and chorus music, the idea of a refrain that is often directly repeated is absolutely central to the structure of this piece, and it's there in the Van Regards. It's there throughout his compositional career. This idea of fundamental simplicity and formal structure. Even when we get to the Catalogue d'Oiseaux and Esquisse, that's very harmonically and gesturally complex pieces. The form itself is really, I would maintain, always very simple. What fills that form is marvelous and wonderful and complex. Whether I would call this a sonata movement, no, I don't. Messiaen is obviously comfortable doing that. So check out the website, zenglop.net. Next episode, we'll continue with this chapter, but we'll dig into the section that he has on plain chant, which starts to get into the areas that are less familiar and more uniquely Messiaen. When we think of the structure of plain chant, I know I always have to look up and see what's an alleluia form. There's form implied in these hymnotic words and in these chant structures, and Messiaen uses those, often overlaid against something like this binary ternary form that he's laid out in chapters 11 and 12.